All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me on this Tuesday evening. My name is Garrett McLaughlin. Got a small group, but an awesome group of people joining today. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your weeknight to be here with me. Tonight we'll be covering 6 foundational movement patterns for runners and how to strengthen them. This is actually a webinar I did a few years back, but I really love, a lot of times we go into strength training thinking, what exercise do I need? And there's so many exercises to choose from. We often get lost into what exercises and why. So if you can approach your strength training with a specific system, to understand different categories, what exercises fit in that category and how those all work together, it actually becomes very simple to put together an effective strength training program. And we'll kind of cover that system here today. Do me a favor before we get started, silence any technology around you. Want to make sure you get the most from this webinar. If you can look around your screen and locate the Q&A button. If you have any questions at any point throughout the webinar, you're welcome to drop a comment, drop a question in there. That's where we can kind of interact throughout this if there's something you want me to answer for you. At the end, I'll introduce a program, the 28-day Accelerator program. If you're in need of getting a specific strength training program developed for you, this could be a very effective way, which is also cost effective. So I just want to introduce that if anyone needs any additional help following the webinar. And tomorrow I will send the webinar replay at around 11 a.m. So feel free to check your email, especially the spam folder, because it can sometimes end up in there. So what we'll cover today during this webinar, what you will learn are the demands of running on the human body. So a lot of times, and you'll hear from past webinars, I talk about principles. The principle of specificity is one of the most important. So if you want your efforts to get you better at a desired result, right? If you want our strength training to get us better at running, we need to understand the amount of stress, the type of stress that running places on the body. We'll cover that. 6 foundational movement patterns that should serve as categories for an efficient strength training program. So I'll break this down into 6 different categories, show you exercises that fit within each category. And I think you'll be able to clearly see what components you need to include within your strength training program. And some of you that I'm working with currently or have worked with in the past, you might start to see the similarities here, but from kind of what I'm teaching to what I kind of prescribe in terms of the strength training program. And like I said, specific exercises. The goal obviously here is to help people get faster, build strength and get stronger, and hopefully reduce the risk of injury throughout the process. Before we begin, like I mentioned a second ago, silence any technology around you. If you can't grab a pen and paper, I just want to make sure as we go through this, if you have any very quick aha moments and you realize, you know what, that's something I can simply include in my program moving forward. Oh, I wasn't thinking about that exercise or that way of doing it. Grab a pen and paper. Make sure you jot down a few notes as you go, because I want to make sure starting tomorrow, right, as you guys go through and have your next workout, you can incorporate some of these strategies in there to see more success moving forward. A little bit about me, since even though I know most of you, my name is Garrett McLaughlin, born and raised just outside of Boston. Went to school at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut for athletic training, sports medicine. Went to grad school in Miami, Florida International University for exercise phys type major there, as I worked with a couple different sports teams and did all of that. So throughout my whole life, I've been playing a whole range of sports, hockey, soccer, baseball, lacrosse, running, just trying to stay active in a variety of ways. And I like the variety, to be honest with you, as opposed to focusing on one thing and only one thing. I like to have a nice, well-rounded routine underneath me. Currently live in Portage, Michigan, and operate out of Raw Strength, which is in Portage, but also Bronson Athletic Club in Kalamazoo for those of you that are local. In 2016, I created the Healthy Running Program. I was just seeing, and I actually was in Nashville at the time, lived there for about 6 years. I just thought there was a lot of gaps, right? A lot of runners training, injured, going through this process of training hard, injury, PT, massage, go back through this cycle again. So try to create the Healthy Running Program to kind of disrupt that in some way, right? How do we get people, again, specifically after physical therapy, to then incorporate strength training, return to run training, get them to a point where we're not just getting out of pain, but addressing some of these things so they're no longer an issue moving forward. And then from there, once we get people hooked, how do we develop a good long-term strength training and injury prevention program? Because things happen, right? 70% of runners get injured each and every year. So there's always going to be something going on with the body. But I feel like with a good strength training program, good running plan, we can hopefully mitigate our risk of injury as best as possible. Top picture here, I think this actually was in Milwaukee last 1 year ago, almost. Bruce City half marathon I ran with my sister. Bottom one here is Kristen and I, my fiance. We went to, I think actually Grand Rapids. That was Grand Rapids probably 3-4 years ago. At a outdoor skate. We went there for the weekend and we're just hanging out. So these are some of the people that I've been fortunate to work with over the years. So I've been fortunate to work with a lot of runners with different goals, which always keeps it interesting for me. Those that are injured and need to get back to training, those that are healthy but want to reduce the risk of injury, those that are training but want to train better or get faster. It just varies. So some of the goals you might see: eliminate pain, return to running, long-term injury prevention, and then from a running mechanics and running training standpoint, how do we get better and more efficient with that? Within the healthy running program, we do that through orthopedic evaluations and movement screenings, slow motion running analysis. So try to get everyone on the treadmill, depending on what service they're participating in, but to look at running mechanics, understand how we can become more efficient. Soft tissue manual therapy, specific active release techniques, and then running coaching and form correction. And of course, what we're here for today, our strength training and injury prevention. So why this topic might matter to you, and like I said a second ago, 60 to 70% of runners get injured every year. So if you're someone that wants to run in a healthy and sustainable manner, strength training probably should play a role in that in some way. Not to be negative or a Debbie Downer, but our bodies tend to decline every decade of life, right? After our second or third decade. So we want to make sure we're adding something in there to slow that decline as much as possible. And we're looking at bone density. We're looking at strength of our muscles, strength of our tendons and our connective tissues, our cardiovascular system, right? So we want to incorporate different types of training that help us reduce that decline over time so we can continue to run and be active in the best manner possible. If you're someone that has races on your radar, right? Maybe you just finished, people here just finished the Ziegler Marathon, a couple of people training for Charlevoix and other things that are coming up here, Bayshore. A lot of different races that will be upcoming as well through the spring or maybe even the fall. If you want to maximize your strength training program in order to see better results as a runner, then I think this topic could be extremely valuable for you. But those of you that are thinking beyond running, and that tends to be the lens that I look at this from, is yes, I want people to be a better runner, right? That's one of the primary goals. However, moving forward, I want them to be stronger, have better balance, reduce the risk of falls later in life, have good, healthy mental health and wellness and all these other things. So I think if we can create good programs, it still allows us to see these positive results from a running standpoint, but ties in some of these other areas as well. We can really set ourselves up for success moving forward. So hopefully with what we cover today, you can take a more proactive approach because, like I said, the injury rates are so high with running, so we can prevent or reduce the likelihood of injuries. You'll only be able to perform better, see better results, and enjoy the sport more for years to come. I want you to have a deeper understanding of how to implement strength training so you can consistently deliver results while fitting that efficiently around your running. That's the other piece, which we're not going to cover today, is how to follow a periodized running plan and strength training plan. Just knowing that as running starts to ramp up, your strength training needs to back down and vice versa. When you get to that off season, we'll say after your goal race, running will back down, strength training will crank up. So things tend to ebb and flow and kind of move around each other throughout the year. But we want to really incorporate strength training in an efficient as efficient manner as possible, knowing that more is not better, better is better. So if we can simplify and really have a good, simple, effective program, I think that's where you see the most results moving forward. And then obviously using me as a resource. If you have any questions, you want to touch base and jump into the Accelerator program, do a phone consultation, email back and forth, or just chat about some things. I'm hoping I could be a resource for you moving forward. So question here, something to think about before we get started. If you can click that Q&A button here and just give me some feedback, we'd love to understand what brought you to the webinar today. So as you were reading through, you were seeing this webinar was being offered, are there key things that you were hoping to get from this webinar? Are there certain areas of your program right now you feel that are lacking? So if you can take a second right now, click that Q&A button, give me some feedback there. I would love to understand what brought you here today. And then obviously we'll try our best to really touch on some of those things during the webinar as well. So take a second, click that Q&A button, depending on if you're your phone, laptop, iPad. Would love to hear from you. That will come to me privately too, so don't worry about anyone else reading that. Good endurance, crappy strength. Yeah, so a classic runner right there, I would say. So yeah, definitely in the right place as we touch on strength training, and I think again can only see better results from a running standpoint if we can again identify what those weak links are, not just strength in general, but there's certain areas of the body, glutes, hamstrings, quads, calves, core, and you can start to build those things up. You can only continue to elevate the bar moving forward. Anyone else? Jessica, Marlene, since I know you guys personally, I can kind of pick on you a little bit. Marlene, refresh my memory for better injury-free running, doing well right now, but sooner or later always get injured. Yep, so I think this, again, good running plan first and foremost is really the priority there, and then creating that good foundation from a strength training standpoint. Hopefully this is a good refresher to see what exercises you're doing, hopefully incorporating some of the exercises we did before, revamping some things from a variety standpoint. But these categories will be helpful. Jessica, everything. I like that. Seem to get slower always at mile 17 and forward. Like to stay strong for entire 26.2. I would feel like that question's a whole can of worms as well, because I think strength training can play a big role there to reduce fatigue later in the race. But then you need to go into what does your running plan look like? Long run, short run, speed work, nutrition and fueling is, I think, even more important for something like that. But I definitely think some of the things we cover today will be helpful for you, Amy. So as we get started here, demands of running on the human body. Running is a single leg plyometric-like activity. You are literally bounding from one leg to the next. So we need to absorb force. We need to land in a stable position. You need strength and power and endurance and stability and shock absorption and all of that on a single leg as you bound from one leg to the next. Because there's so much force coming down on the leg, that's why I tend to really believe strength training can be important. If it was something like, it wasn't as taxing on the body, okay, we probably can get away with it. But as our body continued to decline every decade of life, again, relatively, if not seeing a slight gain in body weight as we get older, we're going to have to experience the same forces, even though we're losing strength, losing bone density, and losing some of those key characteristics to keep our bodies healthy. So that's where if we can offset that as much as possible, be strong, be resilient, be powerful, improve our body's ability to absorb force and to create force and be powerful, that's a really good recipe for long-term success. What's very helpful here from a running standpoint is running is a very predictable movement pattern, right? We look at the movement. Everyone runs a little bit differently, but if you look at some of the research on running, we understand running pretty well at this point. There's always more we can learn, but we understand the types of forces. If we land with our forefoot, our midfoot, our heel, if we overstride and land in front, if our pelvis drops or our foot collapses, we understand what areas of the body that tends to stress. So that's what I like to take in and really consume on the front end when working with someone is when we do a running analysis and evaluation, how does this person present? What does it look like as they run, and what areas of the body do I need to build up in a way, whether it's improving strength, stability, power, or what have you, to make them less likely to become injured and also allow them, because we know the demands and the stresses on the body, what things do we need to build up to allow them to perform better throughout that process as well. So using the research can be extremely valuable. Some of the things I like to look at here, this is kind of the nerdy side of things, types of range of motion, right? Range of motion at each specific joint, how much motion at the big toe and the ankle, the knee, the hip, how much should the pelvis drop and the foot drop as you strike the ground. Knowing those things, you can really tie in and understand what needs better stability, what needs better strength, what needs better range of motion. Because like I said before, more is never better, better is better. So through a good evaluation, if we can see, okay, what is this person's baseline, we can tie in and address the key areas. one thing I often see from a lot of people is they're incorporating a general, this is general, it's too general. Their strength training program, their running plan, they're following something offline, they're putting some exercises together they see from Instagram or what have you. And their approach is very general. It's not specific to their body, and it's also not specific to the demands of running. So if we can get more specific, right, back to that specificity principle, we can only enhance results moving forward. Now, do runners need to strengthen? I would say 100% yes, right? The research is actually very mixed from an injury prevention standpoint, but we know running will help improve running economy and running speed. So you can certainly improve performance well with a good strength training program. Injury prevention, because there's so many variables that go into why people become injured, runners become injured. Your nutrition, your sleep and your recovery, types of running shoes, your strengths, your weakness, your biomechanics, your running plan. It's really hard to say, hey, if we just incorporate strength training, we're going to not get injured. I think we can mitigate and reduce the risk of injury, but we're probably not going to be able to eliminate it altogether. So some of the long-term benefits of strength training: improve bone, muscle, tendon, and joint health, improve running economy and speed, address some of the weak links, like I mentioned, through an evaluation, any deficits in strength, any differences in range of motion from side to side, so we can just function better as a human being, because we want you not just to be a better runner, but also function well throughout your daily routine. You see me looking out the window. There was some hour ago now tornadoes that came through and things like that. So luckily 4 miles south of here, but now the rain's starting to pick up again. I'm curious if more weather is rolling through. But now, as we get into the 6 foundational movement patterns, this is something I stole, like I said, in a nice way. I adapted it from Dan John. I pretty much stole it, right? Like everything else that I do. I think a lot of the good stuff, a lot of the good training methodologies they're already been created, right? For people much smarter than me. So just my job to figure out, okay, which bits and pieces from different people, different research articles can I take and pull in and utilize for my clients. So I've become very good at stealing things over the years and try to give as much credit as I can and not say it's my own, because I mean, these people have created this stuff years and years ago. But when we look at the 6 different foundational movement patterns, they are as follows: carry, and I'll break these down specifically in a second. Carry, squat, hinge, push, pull, and then everything else, which can be a broad category. So what Dan John said, and one of my favorite quotes from him, is, I said it was simple, not easy. So this system is extremely simple, right? It's a way to categorize your exercises in movements. So you can, if you have these key components within your program, there's a good chance you're not missing a whole lot. Yeah, see, there might be better exercises for you, or they might need to adjust and change and increase and progress over time. But if you make sure you touch on all of these categories within your strength training program, you'll be in a good position moving forward. Next thing that comes is the hard work of doing it consistently and making things harder over time. And that's the not easy part. Now, if we look at that carry category, sorry, there's some things I think just naturally from growing up in Boston, some things that just don't come off the tongue as well here. So carry, simply carrying weights, right? As you move from point A to point B, and you hold a heavy pair of dumbbells or sandbags or kettlebells or other things, we're doing these loaded carry exercises to work on stability through the trunk, stability through the pelvis, stability through the foot, just teaching the body how to control itself as we move and locomote from point A to point B. So if we just see in the most basic form here, these are farmer's walks. I'm going to hold a heavy pair of dumbbells in my hand. I'm going to simply walk slowly all the way down and all the way back. My goal here is to minimize that sway or that rocking from side to side. Walk in a nice, stable manner. You think of what's happening here. As I walk side to side, those dumbbells are giving me a little bit of pull in the frontal plane, which is side to side. So I need to engage my core, engage all of those single leg stabilizers to stay in a nice, controlled, and aligned position. So that's, like, I guess, the most basic. With that being said, we can really load this up as heavy as possible. These are challenging weights. We can go pretty heavy on these. I mean, a lot of the women that I work with, they're holding 40 to 50 pounds. All the guys I'm working with are 60 to 80 pounds, depending on how good their grip strength is. And when you get that heavy load in there and that compressive force in the body, you're trying to control that weight as it's pulling you side to side, you really feel the stress and the demand through the foot and the hip and the core. So that's farmer's walks. Next one, and you'll notice with a lot of my training, we try to get on a single leg as much as possible. Going back to the demands of running is a single leg plyometric like activity. So if we can teach the body how to control itself on a single leg, you can see the speed and the difference between the farmer's walks and the marching. I don't know if yours is kind of freezing a little bit like mine, but let me see, is that freezing on your end? I don't know. It's really slow on mine. Sorry, is the tornado warning again? All right, so let me get that off. It's probably annoying on your end too. Sorry about that. All right, so now seeing the difference here to side, getting in a good marching position, controlling the foot, the hip, the core, and the pelvis. You're just marching slowly down and back, holding those heavy weights. The heavy weight's going to provide that pull side to side. You're on a single leg, so it's a lot of single leg stability that's required to really control that position. Our next one here, if we look at tiptoe walking, this is one of my favorite ones as it relates to, again, still getting a lot of the core and the pelvis and the foot, but now tying in the calves as well. So as those heels elevate off the ground, we're using the calves and specifically that deeper soleus muscle in the calf as we slowly walk forward there, again, 15, 20 feet down and back. As you get better at this, you can slow it down even more so, control your body on that foot. So the foot's not rocking and rolling around, right? We're stable. We're controlled through the ball of the foot and we're slowly transitioning to the other side. So these are just simple carry exercises, which I think if you look at most strength training programs now, a lot of people aren't including this. And I think it's a simple exercise. It's not overly taxing, and it's something that really helps translate to good core, pelvic, and foot stability. And then you can also, for those of you, I was talking to a woman earlier today, talking about osteopenia and osteoporosis and those different bone disorders there. But we can add the heavy weight into the hands to create that axial load on the skeleton to also stimulate some good, hopefully improvement in bone density at the hip, femoral neck, and the spine. So that's carry. Next up here, we have squat. So everyone really knows a squat. Squats are common exercises within most strength training programs. I like to start people, make sure people can do a regular squat well. So whether that's a body weight squat or a goblet squat, loading that up to a certain degree, bending into the knees, sitting back into the hips, good alignment and form as you lower down into that. With the squat pattern, we're really taxing the quads to the greatest degree, which we think from a running standpoint, it's really the quads and the calves and the deeper soleus muscle in the calf that are taxed the most. So we really need the squat pattern as much as possible in there because the quads take a beating as we run, especially as we look at hilly courses, ones that have net downhills. I have a few few clients run those quick Boston Marathon qualifying courses, and we're trying to, as much as possible, really tax the quads because the hills really stress the knees and the patella tendon and the quads quite a bit. But making sure over time here, if we can go from a bilateral exercise on two legs, right, good starting point, but not necessarily as specific as possible to running, because we're on two legs, like moving into some type of split squat exercise like that middle one here. So that's simply a stationary lunge, 1 foot forward, 1 foot backward. We're bending into the knee and then pushing, driving from that front leg. So because we're in that split stance position, we need to really focus on stability quite a bit more, how well we're controlling the pelvis and the foot to keep the body in a nice, stable, and aligned position. This is probably hands down one of my favorite exercises, split squat or rear foot elevated split squat, because I think they provide so much value from a running standpoint, and then also touch on single leg strength and stability and all of that. Over time within your running plan, a lot of my runners will see we tend to add more multi-directional movements as their running progresses. Reason being, the more we add the same kind of stress over and over again, the more we could potentially increase the risk of injury. So if we can teach the body how to move in different planes of motion as we run more straightforward, because running is very predictable, we can hopefully offset some of that linear or that sagittal plane movement going forward with some type of lateral type movement, because we want to preserve range of motion around the hip, work on the hips, work on the groin, teach that hip how to move through its full motion because it's a bigger, this ball and socket joint. So you'll see I do add in some different planes of motion in there. And goblet squat, split squat are great, can really help from a performance standpoint, running standpoint, and really bulletproof key areas. Lateral squat is something I really like to tie in later in a running plan as mileage gets up. A little bit lower stress on some of the normal running motions will help the body move in a nice, well-rounded manner. Now, next up, we have hinge. So a couple different examples of hinge exercise. If we think of what happens when you hinge, you're simply bending through the hips, right? We're hinging at the hips. This is a little bit different than the squat. As you lower into the squat, your knees are bending, your hips are bending. Both of those are moving to lower you down. On all of these, we're kind of keeping a small bend in the knees, right? Romanian deadlift and single leg deadlift specifically, and using our hip muscles. So thinking more so glutes and hamstrings, stabilizing the spine. First one here is the hip thrust. Hip thrust. I like this because it is a non-weight bearing lower body glute and hamstring exercise. You're getting a lot of activation through the core as well. All of those core muscles, posterior chain, abdominals, all that have to fire to really stabilize the core as we're driving in that bridge-like motion. The bench helps you get through a good range of motion. So as you drive up, you're trying to get to that level point. So knees, hips, and shoulders form a nice straight line at the very top. But what happens there is your glutes and your hamstrings have to engage to really drive you up. You can see there, knees are staying bent. It's primarily a hip motion as I'm going. I'm not doing anything through my lower back. I'm not doing anything else through my knees. I'm just driving up through the hips to really engage glutes and hamstrings. If you don't have a barbell at home, you can certainly use a dumbbell. You can certainly use a kettlebell, put them across the hips. Most likely not as heavy as it could be, but I think it's still something. It's a very valuable movement. So just keep that in mind. Next exercise here in the hinge category is the Romanian deadlift. So you can see small bend in the knees, hinging at the hips, but very similar to that hip thrust, right? I'm only using and moving through my hips. My back is remaining nice and flat. So I hinge down and then I drive my hips forward to stand. So I'm still thinking similar to that hip bridge or hip lift, that as I bend into the hips, I want to shoot my hips forward into the dumbbell, and that helps me engage glutes to drive through it. In the end, glutes do help quite a bit from a running standpoint as we push off and propel the body. A lot of that's coming from the calf, but glutes, hamstrings, hip extensors, those can be very helpful to work on increasing power and running speed and just creating that balance between the front and the back side of the body. Next up, because like I said, right, we want to get on a single leg as much as possible here, but really find the balance. If I have a split squat, I have some other type of lunge, I have a single leg squat, I might not need another single leg exercise. I want to make sure there's balance between my bilateral or two-legged exercises with my unilateral and single leg exercises. But this single leg deadlift is a great exercise. Small bend in the knees, hinging through the hips, and driving the hips forward to stand. Is actually a whole video. I probably would try. Actually, this video is from 2000, might be 10 years. 10 years old there, back when I was in Nashville. This is one of the first places I worked in Nashville. But you can see as I come up there, I'm almost still leaning forward a little bit. I'm not fully driving through the hip to get vertical. I'd probably drive through, slow down a little bit more, take off my shoes, drive all the way through that motion at the very top. But this one here, just like the Romanian deadlift, as you lower down, you get some lengthening and some stretching through the hamstrings. You're getting that glute medius to really have to stabilize the hip to secure yourself there in a good position. A lot of those foot stabilizers. We're really using a lot of muscles with a single exercise. So as opposed to, and you can see I haven't included any types of machines in here. You can certainly isolate specific areas with the machine, right? If I can do the glute machine at the gym, I can do the hamstring curl. I can strengthen those individual muscles. But running itself is more of a whole body, full body movement pattern. So we want multiple areas of the body to be working together in unison. And that's usually what helps really carry over and translate to good running. Now, next up, push. So next to push and pull are actually upper body patterns. We still need these from a running standpoint. We want to make sure we're strong. We have good posture. We can carry ourselves for a long period of time. The more we start to fatigue and come forward, the more that's going to be detrimental to our lower body mechanics. So the push here is simply pushing away from the ground or pushing a dumbbell or push up. Very simple. So we can start as simple as doing a high plank. It's going to work on building the shoulders, the front of the shoulders, anterior deltoid, the chest, work on some stability of the shoulders to control myself in that position. You can obviously see any type of plank position, we have to engage the core and stabilize throughout that region. So it ties multiple areas together. Next one here. Slow. Yeah, there we go. Next one here is the push-up. Obviously, another good exercise. Everyone's familiar with the push-up. I really like, for a lot of people, making sure there's good form in this incline position first. We master that in an incline, slowly drop the bar down, or go from a table, a kitchen table, to a end of the couch, to the coffee table, to the floor. I think it's a very good way to progress the push-ups over time, to build good upper body and also core strength. And then next up, we have overhead press. Overhead press is simply a vertical pushing pattern as we press overhead. This is done in the tall kneeling position. So this is where I kind of blur the lines a little bit and try to make sure I'm getting more engagement through the core, engagement through the hips, and I'm stabilizing my body. So you'll see with some people, if I want to just work on pure upper body strength, I'll have them sit on a bench, right? Just use the dumbbells, work on Arnold press, overhead press, and strengthen the shoulders. If I want to tie in the core and the hips, depending on what other exercises they have in their program, this is a way I can do it from getting into a tall kneeling position like this, or even a half kneeling position, which is a lunge position on the floor, because we then have to stabilize the hips and the core a little bit differently. Next one here, we have the pull. This, from a postural standpoint, is more important than the push, because it's going to work on these muscles that are pulling those shoulders back into a good position. Your rhomboids, your middle trap, your lats, all those muscles are going to pull the elbows back and maintain good posture. So first one here, we have a seated lower. It's a cable exercise. So seated there, pulling back, shoulder blades pinched together as you get to the very end. And I'm trying to hold myself in that position, right? I'm not trying to lose my posture and round into the spine or get pulled by the weight. Next one here, with a single dumbbell, we can do a bent over row. So hands on the bench, which is giving me just a stability point. My back is nice and flat. I'm hinging the hips in that same hinge pattern we talked about a second ago. And we're pulling back and rowing, engaging from that mid and upper back as we go. Next one's a lat pull down. So like the overhead press a second ago, that was a vertical pressing or pushing motion. Now this is a vertical pulling motion, which is the difference between your bent over, your rowing exercises versus your pull down exercises. Just getting different muscles, right? As we pull this way, we're getting certain muscles. As we pull down, we're getting slightly different muscles. Different muscle fibers work in different ways. And then this can kind of show you how to make sure you get all of those. So obviously nothing, those push and pull, important. I think the carry, the squat, and the hinge are going to be your primary ones from a running standpoint. Your pull is going to be extremely important here because that helps maximize posture. Have something still to push to balance the body. And then in this everything else category, let's see if I click through. Everything else category, you can go any way with that, right? So we can, what else does this person need, right? If we talk about someone that really lacks power or wants to work on bone density, we might add some type of locomotion or plyometrics to get them jumping at higher rates, absorbing force and pushing off and landing and all of that. That's where your locomotion, your plyometrics come in. Someone that maybe has a history of plantar fasciitis or shin splints, working on the calf and the lower leg. That's something I highly recommend regardless. The calf and the quad are going to be the two primary areas you want to strengthen from a running standpoint. So making sure if you need an additional exercise, you already had tiptoe walking, and then you want to add soleus wall sit, like I talked about a second ago, that could help really build up that area to a greater degree. Single leg stability, since running is a single leg activity, single leg stability is important. You want to make sure you have good balance and good control as you're bounding and landing, pushing off from one leg to the next. Core stabilization as opposed to core strength. So if I think of a dead bug exercise, I'll show you in a second, versus a sit-up, which is a strengthening exercise, we want a good stable core. We don't really need to move through a whole lot of range of motion. We want a good stable foundation around there so I can stabilize my core, I can breathe, and I can really position my upper body over my lower body in a very efficient manner. That's what we want from a stability standpoint. And then it's up to you here, but physique specific, right? I was talking to some people the other day, a woman, and she said, hey, Garrett, the summer's coming, right? Can I add a couple arm exercises? Hey, yeah, let's add some arm exercise in there. Like I said earlier, there's no reason why we can't improve ourselves from a running standpoint and have some of these more we say superficial goals, right? To look better and to feel better and more confident throughout the process too. If we're going to be there putting in the time, you might as well get the most from it. Let me see here. Quick question. I don't know why my computer's been really slow. How do you do the lat pull down without that machine? So you can do, I'm going to have to show you, Marlene. You could use your TRX. I know you have a TRX. There's a TRX lat pull down, or there's a TRX pull up. So instead of the lat pull down, a pull up is a good exercise. A dumbbell pull over. If I was laying on my back here, and hopefully this makes sense, I was holding the dumbbell, actually the top of the dumbbell through the end of it, and I was bringing the arms overhead, stretching into the shoulders and the lats, and then using those back muscles to pull back. I could do a pull over. There's different variations that you could do. You could add a band, and even for you, if you have those bands with handles, you could actually loop that around the TRX anchor point, and then you can kneel on the ground and you could pull down from the TRX anchor point. There are a couple of different ways you can do it. You have to be creative. The cables really make it better, in my opinion. TRX is a good substitute, but you can still get it in some other ways. So in that everything else category, some of the things I talked about, the calf complex, you want to make sure you're getting that deeper soleus muscle. On the calf, you see on the outside there that more superficial gastroc muscle, just deeper inside there and a little bit lower down there is that soleus muscle. This, and actually, again, another old video, getting into a wall sit position, elevating the heels 2 inches or so off the ground. See how high I'm elevating the heels? I usually don't even recommend this anymore. Elevating the heels just a couple inches off the floor, nothing more, will actually target that soleus muscle more. You'll also get the quads, like we all know traditional wall sits. We'll get the quads here that hold us in this position. We'll get that deep calf right there. It's a very good way to build up that entire calf complex. From a core stabilization standpoint, one of my favorites, since we didn't cover a whole lot of core exercises in this that fits within this everything else category, we don't need a ton of core exercises, but being able to engage and stabilize the spine so we have a nice straight position from the hip, the spine up to the shoulder, ultimately making sure I'm not going into more of an arched position at my lower back as the arm and legs reach. The stability ball in there, as we push into the stability ball, it just allows more abdominal activation. So it makes the exercise a little bit harder. Some people, it makes it better because it forces them to engage the abs, which stabilizes the spine. Other people, it just makes it harder. But that dead bug in general, a dead bug, stability ball, dead bug, overhead dead bug, there's a lot of different variations of the dead bug. I throw at people. I think it's one of the most valuable exercises, but you need to make sure you don't just do this one. I want you to breathe. I want you to expand into the core as you engage those muscles. We should be able to breathe and stabilize at the same time, and that's really training ourselves how to use that deeper diaphragm. But these are very good core stability exercises. Plyometrics was something I recommended. And especially from if we're trying to improve or reduce the decline of bone density, if we're trying to run faster, we're trying to work on just the overall health of our tendons, how springy and elastic our tendons are, we need plyometrics in there. The more people run, the more I will back down the plyometrics because they're getting so many foot contacts as they train for that goal race. So this is something that would really be awesome to add more plyometrics into the off-season time, right, when it's a lower mileage running time. Maybe as part of your dynamic warm-up, you do a couple repetitions, low repetitions, plenty of rest in between them. A lot of the research shows, so I'll probably do 10 of these ankle hops and then rest about a minute or two in between. We want more rest than we usually think is needed from a plyometric standpoint. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in the webinar today, right? We went through the demands of running on the human body, the 6 foundational movement patterns that serve as categories, and you can see carry, squat, hinge, push, pull, and then everything else. If you simply go and tomorrow for your workout, you write down those categories, you have some suggestions and some things that I put in here. Some of your other exercises might fit well right in there. You can just plug and play. As long as you're hitting each of those categories, you probably have a pretty good strength training program. You can see what the balance is, right? Hey, I have 3 squat exercises, 3 squat patterns. I have no hinge, right? And oh, wow, he has a weak link in there. Or if you're only doing pushing exercises, you're only doing push-ups, you're only doing bench press, you're always doing chest flies. I have all these push exercises, but I don't have enough pull, right? we want to make sure we have good balance between them, ideally addressing the quad and the calf to the fullest extent, our postural muscles of the upper back, our core stabilizers, and then get on a single leg as much as possible. Those are really our priorities. And then sprinkle some of those other things in to make sure you're keeping it interesting and addressing what your body needs. So hopefully those exercises really help cover that. So now, question for you guys. Do you see one to two areas you can improve right now moving forward? So as you think about your current strength training program or lack thereof, are there certain things you feel like you're missing or things that you can do better? Take a second, click the Q&A button. Let me know what that is, or at least make sure you jot down a note on your end. Hopefully you guys have a piece of paper and you wrote down some notes as you went here. But let's see, is there one to two things you can improve starting tomorrow, right, as you guys work out and add that strength training component that you think will be helpful to you? All of them. Marlene, I know you're probably doing most of these though, but you're tough on yourself. I know you. Amy, Carey, I love it. I always think that's the most neglected in my opinion. It's so simple to do. It doesn't take a lot. Once you get the heavier weights, yes, it's tough, but it doesn't require a lot of effort like you're doing a lunge or these other things. There's so much value to it. So I think that's a good one. Okay, so yeah, so hopefully, I think even with these, putting a simple exercise in each of these categories, if you haven't done strength training before, and then depending on how many days per week you're running, if you could add in, I mean, I would start simple. I would add just a single 1 to 2 strength training days. If you do a single exercise per category here, that might take you 20 minutes to get through. So you can add that on, depending on how your week falls. Add it back to back with a run, add it on an off day, still make sure you have your rest and recovery days. You're not kind of sabotaging those. But I think that should be helpful to you. Awesome. All right, guys. So if you feel like right now, like, okay, where do I begin? I understand I need to incorporate strength training. I need to do some of these exercises. I need a system behind it. But you're really unsure which direction to walk moving forward, and you want help with that. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I do have a program. It's called the 28-day Accelerator program. 28 days long, very simple. It's usually like a very good jump start for people to say, okay, this is where I am right now. These are my goals. I want to figure out how to create a plan that's the most effective and efficient for me. What I usually do here with the Accelerated program, evaluations. Let me see if I have a slide here. Consultation, review your injury history, your current strength training program or lack thereof, and running plan to decide, okay, what type of strength training program does this person need moving forward? Then from there, whether you're local or living somewhere else, remote, do a movement assessment, so in person or virtual via Zoom, and then really help you create that 28-day training plan. Strength training, mobility, core, injury prevention, really focus on what you need to be a better runner. For this, I do have a coaching app. So if you come, some people come and see me in the facility, other people do it completely self-guided. I have a coaching app that lays out all the exercises, videos, sets and repetitions, instructions, and things that are specific to you that I write in every single time for every single person. So that is kind of what's included within that 28-day. Sorry about that. Just disappeared right there. That 28-day Accelerated program. In terms of cost getting started, I try to do my best to keep it as cost effective as possible. One thing I usually see, it's amazing when you deal with runners, right? And Jessica here, who came in with a few new pairs of shoes the other day, right? We spend so much money on things. We need the running shoes. We need that. But a lot of times it's the other things which tend to add up when we think about doctor's visits and physical therapy and imaging and all of that. So if we can offset some of that as much as possible, man, we'd only be in a better position moving forward to not waste time on all the other stuff, to stay focused on what our body needs to continue running and seeing success. So because you guys are joining the webinar today, 2 different options. For those of you that are local, we can do some in-person sessions, which would include the evaluation running analysis. We'll add on there complimentary, and 3 in-person sessions for $249.99. If you're someone that wants to be guided, that doesn't want to come in and do in-person sessions, you don't live locally, the virtual evaluation, running analysis, and training plan is $149.99. So this is something I just wanted to offer you guys for being nerds like me and attending the webinar here. I was hoping I didn't have to cancel it when the weather started to turn and the sirens were going off. So I'm glad we were able to do this tonight. But this offer is only available till tomorrow night, Wednesday, Wednesday, May 8th, which is tomorrow night at midnight. So if you are interested at all in claiming that spot, I only have 3 spots available just because that's the only space I have right now. So if you're interested in getting help and creating a good program and putting all these pieces together in a way, again, it's only 28 days. There's no long-term commitment to it, no expectation moving forward. But I just wanted to make sure I put something in front of you that if you needed help and you wanted to work together more closely, to really iron out these details, I'd be there to help you. So if you're interested, click the Q&A button and just write Accelerator in there. And what I'll do is I'll make sure to contact you and reach out directly. We'll find a time to schedule a consultation and just talk about some of those details and figure out what we need to do moving forward, what option best fits you. So take a second, click the Q&A button, write Accelerator in there if you're interested. Otherwise, questions as we wrap up here. Questions, feedback, concerns, anything? And those of you that have put Accelerator in there, I will reach out probably tomorrow morning. Actually, we found out there's a tree down at my mother-in-law's. Probably gonna run over there right now, make sure everything is good with the house and see what kind of damage is there. But I think it didn't hit the house. Luckily, it's kind of damaged the fence and some other areas. So I will definitely reach out tomorrow. But any questions before we wrap up here? Hopefully I answered those as we went. Jessica, who got some of her rails and mobility stuff done during that time. Hopefully she didn't do it for the whole 46 minutes because she probably added 10 different mobility drills in there. I know her at this point. But that's it, guys. I appreciate you joining me today. For those of you who wrote Accelerator, I will follow up with you directly here very shortly. But thank you. Questions, concerns, need anything from me moving forward, I will send the follow-up email tomorrow with the replay of this webinar. Welcome to respond back if you want to find a time to chat or send some emails back and forth. But thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and Tuesday night. And I look forward to hopefully connecting with some of you soon. Thanks, everyone.